Do you like people who like film? Do you like your podcast endearingly unprofessional? Then welcome home.
Welcome.
I've made you a cup of tea just the way you like it. I've even pulled up your favourite chair, as Loz and I are about to continue discussing our top films of all time. And in doing so, Loz, complete our Honourable Trilogy of mentions.
It's an arduous task, but it's God's work we're doing.
Well, it has taken us twice as long as we thought, hence a trilogy of mentions. We originally thought this was going to be a trilogy of film, didn't we? But no, we're going to be into another trilogy after this. But let me tell you, you don't want to miss that, ladies and gentlemen, because that is the absolute business end where we're really going to ramp it up, because that is the definitive top 10 films. And that's each, I should say. Not, between us. We're not sharing a brain, are we?
So not anymore.
So it'd be my top 10 and Loz's top 10. And, we've got some way to go before we get there. We've had a couple of surprises along the way, haven't we, Loz?
We certainly have.
Particularly your most recent entry, which was at the end of the last episode, where I think you started it with something like, now those that know me won't be surprised to see this film in there. And then when you said 8 Mile, I went, I genuinely hadn't thought of that film. So that was where we left off, wasn't it? What else is in store? Shall we step into episode 4, Loz?
Let's get to stepping.
All right. Right, let me get into my next one then. Right, now. This is a film that's very dear to me, and which actually I've only seen quite recently. It's a film that I don't think I've ever talked to you about. I don't know, I might have done. But here it is. It's Silver Linings Playbook.
Oh, okay.
Oh, apologies if that came through. That's a scam text from Royal Mail. Your parcel has a £2.99 unpaid shipping fee.
Phil.
Right. Silver Linings Playbook. So this has a big place in my heart, this film. And it's one of the more, although it came out in 2012, it's one of the ones I saw sort of more recently. Mm-hmm. And I'll get into why it's dear to me. But let me just sort of explain some of it first. So Bradley Cooper plays someone who had a mental deterioration over a breakup, and chiefly sort of anxiety was playing a part in this. And he lost his job in this process, and he winds up in a facility for 8 months. And facility is probably the best term to use, because it feels more sort of correctional than it does compassionate or about true rehabilitation. And anyway, he sort of finishes, graduates, whatever you want to call it, leaves, and sets about trying to sort of demonstrate to his ex that he's changed. But home life sort of triggers him in negative ways. He goes back to his father, who's played by Robert De Niro, who is this sort of superstitious American football fanatic. They're at loggerheads immediately. And through sort of chance, he meets this girl called Tiffany, who's played by Jennifer Lawrence. And she's a widow and somewhat of a live wire, but kind of profiled dismissively by most people around her as like a bit of a fruitcake, but actually she's highly emotionally intelligent and complex, and just really disillusioned with the world around her, and sort of the cutthroat manner in which she's treated. And the same applies to Bradley Cooper's character. So unsurprisingly, they strike up quite a powerful bond immediately, which, yes, threatens to be tempestuous at times, but there is kind of a sense of true understanding for once of each other's respective problems. And so this friendship blossoms, and to skip ahead, it kind of culminates in entering a dance competition that kind of is the perfect thing that could threaten to tear their friendship apart. But at the same time, it represents this tremendous opportunity for them to become best friends if they haven't already. But also, crucially, for Bradley Cooper to win back his ex in spectacular fashion. So obviously, I won't go further from there, in keeping with the spirit of these podcasts, but that sets it up quite nicely, I feel. And so really, again, this is like observations on the human soul and purpose in life, and like confronting your fears and rediscovering yourself. And one of the reasons I love this so much is that basically I first watched this after a sort of similar set of circumstances. And I've got my father to thank actually for like introducing this film to me, because I had no knowledge of this film's existence, to be honest. But I mean,
I must admit, it passed me by.
No, but it won an Oscar. I mean, Jennifer Lawrence won an Oscar for her, and she is superb in this. I mean, I talked about like Kate Winslet earlier and Meg Ryan, and well, you can add Jennifer Lawrence to the list of people that I'm just unconditionally in love with, to be honest, and especially in this. Because again, I think I'm just naturally slightly attracted to live wires, which is the term I think I used.
Yes,
I think I am naturally drawn to that. I mean, that's been proven, hasn't it? Let's face it. So Jennifer Lawrence's character in this is very much the type of person that I would immediately kind of gravitate towards for a number of reasons. And she plays that character so brilliantly in this. And I'm so glad she won an Oscar, because I think, looking at the films I've talked about so far, and even maybe the ones to come, I'm not sure how many Oscars have been won, like for sort of acting performances, acting roles in them. So I'm glad that she did in this, because I don't know what she was up against that year. I didn't do that much research, to be honest, but she deserved it. Whatever she was up against, she deserved it. And
she does seem the perfect actress for that sort of role, I have to say.
Yeah, it's fantastic, man. This film's great. I mean, yeah, it means a lot to me, because there are, a couple of like parallels with things that have happened in my own life. And so, of course, that's going to, if you don't mind, Loz, I'm going to stick that right at the top of this list.
Yeah, sure. I can see a subsequent, easy for me to say, podcast coming where we're going to go and watch these films together and then talk about how they affected us.
Yeah. We'll venture into other realms, as is the plan, like sort of TV and maybe like albums, maybe even sort of video games. I don't know. We'll just see. And then
favorite cake?
Favorite cake? Yes. I'm ready for that, mate.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll come back to this. When we've I'll say it one more time. Yeah,
baby.
So
okay,
what have you got for me?
I'm going to give you a hot slice of Scorsese right now. It's the second Scorsese film in my honourable mentions. Interesting enough, none in the top 10.
Okay.
Now, this film, I have already spoken about how I love a satisfying ending. And if the ending to a film doesn't satisfy me, that's definitely a knock. But again, I have to say, this film evidently is one of my favorite films. The main body of the film is almost impeccable, and it is only my disagreement with the end which really actually does it a massive disservice.
I feel like I know what this might be, but I don't want to say.
Well, the beans are about to be spilled.
Predict it. Go on.
It is, of course, The Departed.
Okay, I was funny enough. I was thinking Shutter Island because of the ending, but yeah, The Departed, a film I have in my collection and adore. So I will sit back and enjoy listening to you talking about it.
I mean, again, it was the first I knew of the Winter Hill Gang and Whitey Bulger, and I know obviously the names have been changed and all the rest of it. Is widely regarded as the inspiration for the criminal element of this film, and the whole setup essentially needs to be no more complicated than the police have got a mole in the mob, and the mob have got a mole in the police, and the police mole is trying to find the mob mole and vice versa. Meanwhile, obviously, as the police are closing in on the gang. You know, I really feel like I damaged the film to give you too much more than that. Just to say it's a beautiful game of cat and mouse. I mean, you got leading actors like Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon. I mean, you're not doing too badly. And you've got Jack Nicholson, you know, as the main sort of villain character. I've written his name down and yet I've got it wrong. So that shows the sort of character I am. But yeah, it's another one. Yeah, quite. You can all thank Scott for keeping me under wraps because, you know, otherwise, watch out. Yeah.
Whereas I'm the plucky guy that everyone loves and gets behind naturally.
Yes, well, that's true. Hence yin and yang. Once again, you know, we are a coin. One side is you, one side is me. And there's very little in terms of edge.
But that edge that's obviously between the two sides, the thin edge that runs around the perimeter.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm that edge as well, and that tips the balance just like 3% in my favor. That's what I was getting
okay.
at.
I'll let you have that. But yeah, returning to The Departed. As I say, it feels like I'm selling it short because it really is another beautiful sort of exhibition of paranoia and ambition that potentially has not really resulted in what you're going for. People's emotions being played with, never being safe. That constant sort of gnawing feeling that you around the next corner is going to be your end, sort of thing. I think it was brilliant. Again, such a strong cast, really enjoyable. And I think there's some films that I could recommend that might need some sort of prior information coming out before you're really going to get the most out of it. But I do think The Departed, it is another one of those. Pop it in. And away you go. I'd struggle to find anybody who disliked the film.
I think it's such an interesting web of like jeopardy and mind games, and
definitely.
And so how earlier I was talking about like, oh, I like this genre, or I don't like that genre, and we're like, well, forget that. Like, it's about this, irrespective of the genre. I mean, look at like Game of Thrones comes to mind for me here in terms of like. For example, I mean, yeah, sure, breasts, dragons, what's not to love there, right? But that's not what got me watching Game of Thrones, because I was actually in the minority. Again, well, yeah, I was saying earlier, like, I think Avatar was maybe where I brought this up. I didn't want to be another person indoctrinated into the Game of Thrones universe. I enjoyed being outside of that for a while and being in the minority. And then eventually I watched it and I realized, well, yes, there's this fantasy side to it. And again, to slightly spoil what's to come, you're not going to be hearing anything about Lord of the Rings in my upcoming list, right? Because that is just not really my thing. And that's probably why I didn't really want to watch Game of Thrones at first. But when I did, I realized that it was so much about like the humanity and the politics of it.
Yes.
And that's what kept me watching. And I'm really starting to raise my voice now talking about this. But yeah, it was less to do with dragons and stuff like that. But I was kind of just really enjoying the humanity and the psychology and the mind games of it. And that very much is similar, I think, to what goes on in The Departed. That there's whose side are you on? Like, can you really trust what's being said here? And you can analyze things either way, and that ambiguity is written into it as well. So it's very cleverly done. And yeah, it's about deceit and trust and mistrust, and then having to make huge calls based on something that you're probably not quite sure on either.
Oh, sure. And I mean, I'd just like to take a moment to also point out it brought us I'm Shipping Up to Boston by the Dropkick Murphys, which is an absolute anthem and will be in your head for days having watched this film. If not a slight Boston accent, because it's an earworm of an accent. It works its way in there. I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio shows such vulnerability at times in his character for again another character that has to be, it's tough and survive in this gang of ruthless murderers and drug dealers. And to hear that it's at least even partially based on a true story is almost ridiculous. But it makes it all the more compelling as far as I'm concerned.
And when you were talking about Dropkick Murphys and you said anthem, right? I clicked my pen, if you didn't hear it, there it is again. And I wrote down the word anthem, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm looking at the next film on my list. And the first, I mean, I didn't make many notes on this film, but the first thing I put is anthemic.
Wow, okay.
And so I suppose, let me tell you why. So again, it's another 90s film, Loz. But again, but this one really again lives. It could live outside. This could have been released anytime because it's not live action. It's animated, and I mentioned, I think, when I was talking about like just the mentions at the start, where we fleetingly went through that list of things that didn't quite make the cut, and I mentioned Fantasia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's a Disney film which for me tops that somehow.
Oh,
I mean, can you guess what it might be? If I said it comes out in 1990 or came out in 1994, and the intro is anthemic, which is why I wrote that down after you said the word.
well, I would have said Lion King to start with if you hadn't have said 1994. So because of that, I'm going to switch that and say Jungle Book.
Right. No, it's The Lion King, mate. It's
Hey!
The Lion King. Yeah, The Lion King came out in 1994. And yes, it has been recently reprised. And yes, I will talk about that very briefly. But no, I am...
Are you in favour of the remake?
I'll get to that. So
sorry to rush you, dear.
No, it's quite all right. No, there's no rush here. But I want to start by talking about how this film started.
Okay.
So yeah, 1994 was when it came out, and I mean, I probably don't need to say too much about this film because we're all aware of this. We've all seen this. I mean, even if you were born 6 years ago, you've probably seen the original Lion King. You wouldn't be listening to this podcast, so we'll forget that. Right. So
I mean, I'm by no means a fan, and yet I could probably sing by heart Hakuna Matata. So
Well, I mean, the reason anthemic is a word that I'm about to say for about the fifth time this minute is because, like, the intro, Arsene Wenger and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
It is so anthemic. It's if you watch the opening 5 minutes, well, it's probably not even that. I think it's really quite a short intro, maybe 3 minutes or something. But oh my Lord, I can't think of another film that really just like gets you pumped like the intro to this film does. And to jump ahead and talk about the remake, I'm not a fan, but I will say this: they did do the intro very, very well. And when I went to the cinema, I mean, have you been to the Regal cinema, Loz?
I can't say as I have, actually, I think.
Right, okay. Well, I mean, again, I don't want to waffle too much here, but I live quite close to a cinema called the Regal, which is very much a loving restoration of like an Art Deco's 30s style of cinema. And then they have modern conveniences beautifully stacked on top. Like, for example, you can text the bar and they will bring a beer to you during the film, or a pizza. You'll have this guy ducking and weaving and bringing you a pizza or whatever. So it's a really cool like viewing experience where it's got that modern stuff if you want, but at the same time it's very much an authentic 1930s Art Deco style of cinema. And that's where I saw the Lion King remake, and I thought, yes, after a few minutes I thought, yes, they've captured this, they've captured the soul of the original. Oh, am I in for a brilliant hour and a half? And then the rest of it really pissed me off, so I'll just avoid that bit. So but the original is, I mean, objectively it does deserve to be called possibly the best Disney film. I know it's a lot of people's favorite. But so yeah, I mean, I didn't particularly like the remake because there was a certain well-known singer's warbling trill arpeggio style of ruination on the original classic songs, which made this the thing that I love. The CGI was stunning, but as the old adage goes, CGI doth not maketh the film alone, right?
Oh, that old chestnut.
So, I mean, this is the perfect example of classic Disney, which had like a more primitive animation style and technology, but somehow made the characters more emotive, and subsequently you sort of empathize with them more. And I don't really need to go into the plot, obviously, but I mean, we talk about classic villains in films. Surely Scar takes some beating, right?
Sure.
And we mentioned Animal Kingdom earlier, like the theme park. I mean, I learned there, if you want some pub trivia, here it is, right? Simba literally means lion in Swahili. Rafiki means friend in Swahili. And then you've got Timon and Pumbaa means stupid in Swahili. So take those away with you. But,
Keep that in your back pocket.
yeah, but like Simba is such a strong protagonist. I mean, have you ever rooted for someone more than you do with him in this film? And his relationship with Nala, of course, and like the ebbs and flows of it, it's so captivating, and it shows what a good film is capable of. It's like it's fun, it's euphoric, it's heartbreaking at times. It makes you really angry at times, but in a good way. You know, it's like it's the full package. And for the sake of time, you know, I won't dither or, you know, waffle too much about The Lion King, because we all know this film. But I mean, just for me as a viewer, you know, Disney at their best are like almost insurmountable in filmmaking. And the original Lion King.
I mean, I have to say, as somebody who I'm not anti-Disney, but I have sort of chastised those for being overly sort of Disney Plus and sort of, you know, everything that Disney does is amazing.
Oh no, there's a difference between Disney the corporation and Disney the.
Sorry,
yes.
Go on.
No, sorry, no, I don't want to go on. I want you to go on. I've talked enough about this. I want you to give me your 2 cents.
Okay.
And even maybe some more.
Maybe 3 cents. Who knows? If you're lucky.
Well, you can round it up to a nickel. Yeah.
I won't nickel and dime you, mate. Come on. So
no,
yeah.
No, sorry. Go on.
Yeah, shut up.
When we get to Disney, I get excited. Right.
And I get angry. What does that tell you?
Yeah.
But I've got a lot of love, even with all that said, for what I think most people would consider the classics. I mean, Lion King, Jungle Book. I always enjoyed the Disney animated Robin Hood, particularly. That's one of my favorites as a child. Yeah. Who doesn't like a fox that can shoot arrows? I mean, he's got no thumbs, but he's giving it a go.
Oh, Loz, I'm turning around right now and I'm observing my VHS collection of the 90s, and I'm looking at the likes of Lady and the Tramp, the Aristocats, the Rescuers.
Oh, God, yeah.
Oh, how I love the Rescuers. And I'm looking at many other Disney films as well from that era that I love. Pinocchio, one which I'm not going to talk about because tapping my nose ever so subtly, there might be another Disney one to come later. So just
the sheer intrigue. I just think it's disappointing that these days Disney have run out of sort of good stories to tell, other than the MCU, which is a sentimental favorite, even if you don't like it. Sorry. But this transparent sort of we're going to CGI everything and re-release all the old classics because people love it and they'll pay for it. Definitely leaves a sour taste in the mouth. I know that's not what we're talking about here, but you know.
No, I agree, man. I mean, I had this discussion with someone recently, right? And recent Disney films. I mean, so there's 2 things to talk about. One is the animation style, which nowadays is much more glossy and kind of, you know, which in some ways for me detracts from the emotive or emotion that's going on, and I can see it more in these classic films than I can in the new ones, right? But I just feel that I love Disney because Disney World, but that's more to do with me just loving theme parks, I think, than me just loving sort of Disney themselves. But I feel like it's become very formulaic with them, and so often now there's this central theme of like a mischievous princess. I mean, I look at like Brave, look at Frozen, look at even Moana, right? They all follow that sort of trend. But if you look back, I mean, Aladdin was similar, but then it was a bit more fresh back then, you know? I haven't got a fundamental problem with these later films, and I know there are things that are keeping Disney alive, but it's not just about my nostalgia and love for those original films. It's that I really think they had something to say. And I think some of the later stuff is treading on old ground, reprising things in a way that's not sufficiently different. And then the animation style nowadays I think it's almost like it's more expensive and cheaper at the same time. And I don't really know how better to say it. And I might be wrong. I don't know enough about these things and how these films are made. I remember being in Disney World when they were working on Mulan, right? and I actually saw them. I saw the animators working on it. That was something they could like let you in on and sort of lift the curtain, as it were, and let you see them working on it. And I thought that was really cool. And Milan definitely is one of the better Disney films. And it wasn't long after that things ventured a bit south for me. And I just, yes, it has got a little bit to do with the nostalgia, but at the same time, I genuinely think there was this. Well, the thing is, Disney's been going for goodness knows how many years. And again, that point will be made later. They're a classic. I've basically given this film away already, haven't I? There's a Disney film coming up, and I've now inadvertently left about 5 clues as to what it is, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. But no, it got to that point, maybe again around the turn of the millennium, and it's like, oh, well, I almost don't want to go into Opeth because that's going off on a tangent, isn't it? But you know what I mean, Ross, when I say Opeth, and let's leave it there.
Okay, because, yeah, sure.
Yeah. All right, and anyone who doesn't know where Opeth are, well, keep listening, mate. Opeth will get explained.
Stay tuned.
Opeth will get explained as long as you keep listening.
Yes, definitely. I think some things come perfectly formed. They don't need to be readdressed. Even if they've got a valid point to make, it still doesn't detract from the perfect entity that came before it.
Yes,
and yeah, that's how I personally feel about it, even without being necessarily against the new films. With an undoubted a richness, not only in what you see literally sort of drawn, but also in story and indeed the supporting music. Yeah, absolutely great choice.
Chip, chip, chow.
And I have to say, my next choice, a little bit controversial, maybe a little bit. It's standing on the shoulders of another franchise. I'll give it that, but it's also you might sort of sense a bit of a sort of a theme coming here. It's another film with a protagonist that I immediately identified with, a film that I really enjoyed, with a really compelling message, if nothing else. And I've always also been the sort of person where if I can get the grips with the film, if I can really feel sort of the beating heart of the film and feel the thrills and the life experiences of that character almost as my own, and anticipate how that would make you feel to be in those situations. I think that's a real craft. We're talking here about Creed.
Right. A film
now, I left a little pause
nothing
there.
about.
I left a little pause there because
I don't think I've heard you talk about either. Yeah. No, well, I mean, just consider me a complete Luddite for this, because I know nothing about Creed, so I'll be able to offer no feedback on this other than based on what you say.
Goody gumdrops. So yeah, naturally, it is obviously following on from Rocky, and Rocky is a great film, no doubt. But for me personally, I just found Creed more accessible.
Right, you said first of all, you say obviously it follows on from Rocky. Is that because you're talking about Apollo Creed?
Yes. No,
yes.
It's,
okay.
It's Apollo Creed's son is
right.
the protagonist in Creed.
Oh, okay. Right. So I didn't even know that. You see, Creed could have meant anything to me.
Okay. So Apollo Creed is killed in the ring, but he's already fathered Michael B. Jordan's character as Adonis Creed, and he essentially, his life's not really going the way he. Well, actually, I suppose he's got a fairly decent job, but he keeps taking these sort of low rent boxing matches. He's got skill, but he's just not willing to use his father's name to sort of rise up the pole, to rise up the rankings, I suppose would be the term. And to really sort of step out of these dusty gyms in sort of Tijuana, Mexico, and stuff like that, and become like a real legitimate fighter. And it comes to the point where he shows up to work and he's got a black eye. He'd won the fight, but he's clearly not really in any sort of state, and it's seen almost reminiscent of a Fight Club. And he the manager sort of goes, look, I'm more than happy to sort of keep you on, but tell me that this is where you want to be. And he says, no, I belong in the ring, and walks out and travels to find Rocky, who's accepted his retirement and he's owning a restaurant, and he's telling his old war stories to the public, and it's really cute. I do think that the rocky world with which this definitely inherits from the Rocky films, funnily enough, is really well realized, and definitely I will say my knowledge of those films is informing of how good and how quickly I took to Creed. But I do like those films. I do know those films. So here we are. But yeah, Michael B. Jordan's character Adonis is, I mean, that feeling of wanting to do your father proud, but at the same time not wanting to sort of be overcast by his legacy, wanting to trust someone like Rocky who was close to him, but then also having that feeling like Rocky was there when he was killed, and should Rocky have sort of stepped forward and stopped the fight in the film where Apollo Creed gets killed in the ring. And there is so many conflicting emotions. He's also starting up a new relationship with Tessa Thompson's character. She's really interesting. I think that's a nice little addition they've made to it. She's definitely not Adrienne, which I think it would be very tempting to have a similar sort of archetype there. I think she's her own character. I mean, as she's a musician who's slowly going deaf, and I really sort of appreciate that. That was something that really, her passion for what she did, and she was, I'm going to do what I can do until I can't do it anymore. I really appreciated that little character detail.
Yeah, that's really commendable. Yeah.
It's not necessarily going to throw you through different sort of twists and turns quite like something like The Departed or The Usual Suspects, but at the same time, I can just say no more than it put me in his shoes, and by the end of the final sort of build-up fight, I was sat there sort of almost swinging punches with him, willing him to victory. And feeling that not only was he going to win, that he deserved it. I think as a storyteller, you can't do much better than that. And I mean, I enjoyed Black Panther, which also was directed by Ryan Coogler and starred Michael B. Jordan, as well as unfortunately Chadwick Boseman. God bless his soul, the late Chadwick Boseman. Okay. But yeah, I really enjoyed Black Panther, and especially Michael B. Jordan. It was another character that was very well realized and good motivations, and you can see the way that this came before that as helped lay the groundwork for what a success Black Panther was. I really enjoyed Creed. It was another one of those films where I enjoyed it pretty much beginning to end. There were points where I cried, there were points where I smiled. And at the end of it, I just wanted to see more. And I think that's one of the biggest sort of compliments I can pay any film.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not much I can say in response to that because I haven't seen it. I mean, I've seen a couple of the Rockies and I think they're great. But a couple of things you touched on are kind of similar to at least one boxing film that I've seen. And again, I don't want to turn this into another film because that's not fair.
Sure.
But like, I watched Cinderella Man. And it sounds like that has some similar things. I'll just quickly whiz through what I was thinking of. Like that idea of just sort of austerity and that make or break where you have a choice. Do you want to put yourself through a gauntlet in the hope that things might get better and risk making it a lot worse? And that's, Cinderella Man's worth watching. And it sounds like this has some parallels with that. And I mean, boxing isn't massively my thing. I'm kind of, yes, when Tyson and AJ eventually get in the ring, I will be as excited as anyone. That's partly because of the hyperbole, and I get engrossed in that because I think that plays a big part often with boxing. Maybe not so much in this, because with what you were talking about there with Creed and what I was talking about with Cinderella Man, the trash talking isn't really a prevalent factor at all. In modern day boxing, it is, of course, and naturally, I think Sky Sports have a big part to play in this. They're to blame, if anything, for people getting sucked into this world of boxing that they don't care about, but they're duped into thinking they do temporarily. But yeah, this sounds like it's dealing with boxing, just boxing, and the natural gauntlet that you go through in your mind with everything associated with what is a very extreme profession. And so, I really want to see that. I'll add that to the list. Right, where are we? Oh, we've got one more left each, haven't we?
We have indeed.
I've just realised something. Oh, you're going to think this is deliberate. I've got two here, which aren't in the top. What do I do about that? Like,
Right.
because that's not parity, is it? I've got to talk about both of these, Loz, because I feel I feel like I would have sacrificed something else earlier.
Okay.
So I don't know how this.
Tell you what, you do one, I'll do one, and then we'll sign off with your final choice.
Yeah, and then maybe in the next one you can add another one. Because I want to ensure parity in this.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
All right. Yeah, I promise you, this is not conspired to let me talk about.
I know it isn't. I know what you like.
Good. Yes, you do. Yeah, you do. All right. Well,
I bloody do.
Well, okay. Well, this is a film which is immediately historic, Loz, because it came out in 1987, which, as we all know, is a year that will forever go down for having been the birth, literally, of Scott and Loz.
Indeed.
So already, this film's onto a winner. Right now, when I talked about Fear and Loathing and just two nutters causing chaos, right? Now, and I also talked about cult films and how like cult doesn't necessarily mean unpopular. It just means it's got a very devoted fan base. And it's
almost like it's an acquired taste, isn't it?
Yeah, and this is very much that. And if you haven't already guessed, it's With Nail and I.
Nail and I, yeah.
Paul Rudd's favourite film. So there you
go.
Right. So anyway, this is about two down and out actors. With Nail in particular, who's played by Richard E. Grant brilliantly. He's superb in this, and apparently he had to audition like 3 times or 4 times for this until they were sort of convinced that he was right for the role. And then if you saw the film, I mean, that's perhaps being harsh on the audition process. Maybe they just didn't get a feel for it during that. But trust me, he is perfect in the film as With Nail. And he plays like a down and out actor who sort of fancies himself as a thespian who just hasn't been noticed yet. Like, I'm glorious, but just the right thing hasn't come along yet. And then you've got the I character in With Nail and I, who I think is called Marlowe or Marlon, Marlsberg, whatever. I don't know. He like equally destitute and sort of with no sign of any kind of upturn on the horizon. And they decide they want to get out of London and into the country to like rejuvenate, which I think is the word they use in the film. And With Nail borrows the keys to this cottage in Penrith, which is like, that's way up in Cumbria, I think, in the Lake District, far cry from London. And With Nail borrows the keys to this Penrith cottage from Uncle Monty, who's played by Richard Griffiths quite brilliantly. God rest his soul, because he died a few years ago. A lot of people might know him as Uncle Vernon, if you're a Harry Potter fan. He's Uncle Vernon, but I will remember him more fondly as Uncle Monty. And needless to say, this
do you feel like he was typecast?
No, not at all. They're two very different uncles. Needless to say, though, like this retreat is anything but tranquil. I mean, because these two guys are just who they are, right? They immediately get into altercations with the locals. Like there's like their inability to deal with basics, just as like there's cooking and heating. There's no electrics in the place, and excuse me, there's even fending off of some hilarious sexual advances, which I won't spoil. For anyone that's seen it, you'll know what I mean. But I'll keep that quiet. But it's this film, like I say, it's cult, and in that sense, it's sort of very quotable. Like it's very, very quotable. There's an annual event like at the house in Penrith where it was actually filmed, and the film actually gets projected onto the cottage wall there, and they serve cake and the finest wines available to humanity, which is at least some nod to what happens in the film, which I haven't got time to go into.
Is that a quote? Is it?
Well, there's loads of quotes in this, but I do you know what? I don't want to use a single one with this, but it really is up there as one of the great comedy films for sure. I tend to prefer comedy shows on the whole, and of course we'll get to that. But in terms of comedy films, I think With Nail and I is rightly heralded as like an absolute classic. And the final one, which I didn't realise was actually an illegal entry, if you like, which I'll get to after yours, is also in the comedy genre. So I'll wrap it up with Nail and I for the sake of that, because I feel bad now. I've somehow created 10 honourable mentions, and I don't want to leave this last one out. So I'll shut up now. If there's anything you want to say about With Nail and I, have you seen it? I don't think you have.
No, I've not seen it. You yourself have actually shown me certain snippets from the film, but I don't think enough to in any way ruin the viewing experience that is ahead of me, because it's definitely going to be yet another one of these films that I'm actually really looking forward to experience. From the small sort of experience I have with Nail and I think that Richard E. Grant is absolutely singular. I don't think the part could have been done by almost anybody else.
There's nothing else like it. That's the best thing I can say, and the shortest, and in fact the best thing I can say really is there's nothing else like this film.
Yeah, it did seem also almost like a uniquely British film, with sort of a wink and a nod, as opposed to the savage rampage that is Fear and Loathing or something like that. It seems to be a quintessentially English film.
Oh yeah, you betcha. It is like inadvertently a British precursor to that. Not that this would be willingly doing that, because of course it came before it. I do wonder if Fear and Loathing was to some degree a loving ode to the likes of With Nail and I, because they do share a lot of similarities.
But yeah, I'm afraid I can't really add too much more to that, other than I'm looking forward to watching it, and I am slightly bemused as to how I've gone this far without watching it.
I think it's because
right up my alley.
I think it's because I've been so insistent that we watch it together, that's been what's probably delayed it. And I've somehow got 3 copies of this DVD, and I can't explain that, to be honest. But yeah, so I mean, this was already on the list, but I'll write it down and add it to the list. Right, I'm excited to get into your final one, and then I'll sort of have to slightly guiltily, but at the same time unapologetically, do my final one as well. But if you're going to
do it, do it justice. That's all I'm going to say.
So, Loz.
I'm here to talk about a film. It's a last but by no means least. And it's actually already been raised once already. This is Terminator 2.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome.
I mean, if I had any sort of contact with an alien and they asked me what an action film was, I would show them Terminator 2. Again, I don't really feel like giving you a deep dive, because it's if you've never seen it, it's a juggernaut that once it takes off, it rarely lets up, and when it does, it's all the better for it. It is, to my mind, almost the ultimate action film. There's thrills and spills. It's iconic. I don't think you necessarily need to be a dedicated admirer of Terminator 1 to be able to get all that Terminator 2 brings to the party. I always admired Sarah Connor is a really iconic woman's character.
Yeah,
I think there's so many instances these days of the woman being made to be strong and be sort of able to win at all costs and brave and all these things without it actually feeling like it's earned. But with Sarah Connor, she really feels like she's had to fight and scrap for everything. And she's obviously, everyone treats her like she's crazy because she feels like there's this robot that has come from the future to kill her, and she had to, have someone else sent back from the future to protect her. He impregnated her, and she gave birth to a son who has been placed, in the protective child services and is with a foster family at the time of the film. And she's in a mental institution where of course they all think that she's completely mad, and she has transformed from, I wouldn't quite say a meek woman, but she's certainly in the first film far away from the almost militaristic person that she is in the second film. She's real hardcore, a character of any gender that you can instantly sort of get behind.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, for me, with this, it's like it's almost incidental that she is female. You know, it's
Yes.
more that as a person, she goes through this journey and she emerges as this badass. Like, it just has to be. You know, has evolved and just learned and had the requisite.
She didn't necessarily want to be.
Yeah,
she had to be.
Yeah, and I think, you know, this film came from a place in terms of its conception, but just not thinking about gender. You know, I mean, especially if you look at the character, if that's what you want to call it, of the Terminator in this, or the Terminator in the first one, that has nothing to do with gender or race or anything, you know, or species even. It's just this thing, you know, this cold, lifeless killer. And I think, yeah, Sarah Connor would be lauded these days as something that would not be to do with what it should really be about, whereas back then it was just made that Sarah Connor was just this brilliant character that went through this journey. Like I say, you know, to go back to the first thing I said, it is almost, well, the fact that it is Sarah Connor, a woman, doesn't matter at all. It's just
no.
You know what I mean? I'm blubbering now.
Exactly. I think it's a showcase of what was actually able to be done at that time. I mean, not only with practical effects like, you know, a fire engine, crashing across a highway, sideswiping cars left and right, to the effects of the new Terminator, who, you know, can sort of achieve a liquid form and sort of reconstitute. You know, I think that's really added to the initial threat of the Terminator, with that sort of unstoppable, what's it going to take to kill this guy sort of vibe to it. I love it. I don't think it's like, you know, a few people might say, like a few on my list, doesn't have to be the most intelligent film in the world, but it works. I enjoyed watching it, and I don't really have to ask for too much more than that.
Oh, I love it. I mean, yeah, and like you say, you know, with the first Terminator and the first time, it's much more to do with almost like the mindset of like what's going to stop the intent for this thing to kill, you know. Whereas with Terminator 2, it's much more to do with the technological advances and the, like, wow, this thing can now transcend like a physical state into liquid form. You know, like what on earth is going to stop this thing? It ups the ante so much. And yeah, like going back to, well, it won't be the start of this podcast, well, it was but earlier on in what's already become a series, we were saying how we had both seen the second one before the first.
Yes, exactly.
And with it being the second one, but actually being a sequel, you know, right? Because often the second film in a series actually ends up being a prequel, and it doesn't do any harm to see that one first. But in this case, it is a sequel. And the Terminator, if you want to look at sort of Arnie and the character he plays, is very different in this compared to the first one. And it's fascinating. I love this film so much. And it's played a big part in my childhood, really, seeing the Terminator 2
for the
first time.
Would you say one of the best sequels of all time?
Yes, I would.
Yeah.
There's another one I can think of which I will hold back from because I know it's coming up in your list.
I was trying not to mention that actually, but yeah, you're not wrong.
No, I can think of some other sequels that are like solid, but no, this is absolutely deserves to be talked about as one of the best sequels. You know, one of the ones that arguably trumps the original. And
I admire the efforts of Terminator 1. But Terminator 2 is a fully formed experience.
And is there anything else you want to say on the Terminator 2?
No,
Terminator 2. It's not the Terminator.
I think I've summed up my feelings quite well. And,
it's a superb film.
It is.
And I mean,
what a joy! What an absolute joy!
Yeah. It is. And like also, right, with the Terminator 2 or Terminator 2, I'm sure no one's going to be that pedantic to call me out on that one. It's one of the two, isn't it?
I might.
You'll go away and find out and then tear into me next episode at some point.
Just slap you across the face with a book of grammar.
Terminator 2 had special effects that for its time were quite groundbreaking. I mean, I don't know, I can't remember exactly when it did come out, but it was probably about 95 or something, 96.
It's 91.
91?
1991. Yeah.
Terminator 2 was 91.
Yeah.
Good Lord. Yeah, I mean,
that shot you up.
Well, it did. That shocks me really in terms of the special effects, because the stuff you see in that for its time is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's a nice segue into my final illicit entry at the end of this podcast, right? Because this film also had special effects which for its time were groundbreaking and legendary, actually, for its time. And it was 1964 when this film came out. And we, at the start, at the very top of this list, we were talking about Kubrick, and I said, oh, there might be some notable omissions, which, you know, if you're a Kubrick fan, you'll jot those down and be like, right, well, I'll hear that down the line. Well, you're about to hear one of them, and that's Dr. Strangelove. So this is it's black and white, and it's as black as it gets in terms of black comedy. It's a satire, really, on the Cold War between the US and like the Soviet Union. And we talked about South Park a couple of times, right? And you know, like sometimes with the South Park episode, like you explain the premise to someone, and they just say like, "What?"
Yeah.
Like, so this kind of, so what if I were to tell you, Loz, because I don't know if you've seen this film.
No.
What if I were to tell you that this film is basically about how one man's bitterness over his sexual impotence threatens to bring about the end of the world?
That's pretty out there.
There's this high-ranking official who's called Jack D. Ripper, right? And he triggers a seemingly irreversible series of air attacks on Russian soil, exceeding his authority in doing so. And then basically the film is about how the president and other top generals desperately try and stop this from happening. And one of the generals is called Buck Turgidson, right? So there's this almost slightly juvenile underlying running theme of like sexual impotence. But that's quite a ludicrous premise for a film. But really, I suppose probably the main thing I should talk about, or at least one thing I want to make sure I don't miss when I talk about this, is, again, at risk of bold comment, quite possibly the greatest acting performance or performances in film history.
Oof.
Right. I mean, Peter Sellers, a lot of people might think of him from like Pink Panther. But I mean, I think of him solely for this film because he actually plays three characters. He plays the president, the American president, who tries to thwart this thing from happening. He plays this British captain called Mandrake, who's like a sniveling weed of a man. Is like, oh, I've got this gammy leg. You see, my string was gone. I couldn't do it justice really. But like, just give us the code, old boy. Anyone who's seen the film will know what I mean there, and they'll also be thinking, yeah, that was a shit impression. And he also plays Dr. Strangelove himself, who is like an ex-Nazi scientist. And I won't impersonate him in case I get into trouble. But
eccentric in the extreme, I think it's fair to say.
Yes. And Robin Williams named Peter Sellers as his favourite actor and cited this film in particular as like the pinnacle of his like sort of acting prowess and something we should all look to for like an example of just how good comic acting can be. And he would have also played another character in this who was like a pilot of the infamous wing but I think Peter Sellers broke his arm or something and couldn't do it. And that role ended up getting played by Slim Pickens, who I mean, even if you haven't seen the film, you'll probably be aware of a scene that's just been parodied time and time again, which is like riding a bomb like through the air. Yeah. So like the Simpsons did it, like they do.
Yeah, I was going to say, famously, Homer rides the bomb. And then it cuts to don't ride the bomb. Yes,
exactly. Yeah. So. Yeah, in a nutshell, that's what this is, this film. And it's a farce, just like, I guess, a bit like With Nail and I and a bit like Fear and Loathing, But it's about this ridiculous chain of events that unfolds. And it's incredibly written. And like I said at the start, for its time, the visuals are astonishing. I mean, I didn't quote anything in With Name and I, but I've got to quote one thing from this, which is quite famous, which is, "You can't fight in here. This is the war room."
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Everyone knows that quote, even if they haven't seen the film. And I think objectively, this quite possibly deserves to be called sort of the greatest comedy film, certainly that I can think of. I mean, I've talked about some other comedy films that I love. And a lot of people will talk about like Monty Python films, which I really enjoy. I personally think the Flying Circus material was better than what they did for the films, but that's just me. I think for me, Doctor Strangelove, again, I can't quite believe this hasn't made the top 10, because I always kind of thought it was in my top 10. And it was only when I came to compile them seriously for this podcast that I realized, wow, it isn't. So, yeah, Doctor Strangelove, a goddamn masterpiece, which anyone who's seen it will attest to. Again, it's a film you'll see pop up in, like, I don't know how much credence you would give to, you know, Empire magazine or Professional Opinions, as it were, but you'll always see Doctor Strangelove come up as like a legendary film, and rightly so.
Oh,
because it is legendary.
It's definitely got a notoriety to it.
Yes, and I'm sorry, my silence there was writing it down. I was adding it to the list of things that we need to watch.
Yes, no, I'd be very interested to watch it with you. I'd actually be more interested to watch it with you than I would to watch it on my own. But yeah, no, it's often. I mean, Peter Sellers often cited by many inspirational comedy figures as a massive influence. And I think massively sort of skipped over by our generation for a lot of it. I think it's one of those films that sort of tried to point out the ludicrousness of war. And I think at the time that it was released, that was sort of quite a prominent sort of idea. You know, we're not, certainly if we're not in range of, we're certainly not far away from things like Vietnam. You know, the unwinnable war situation not being accepted by these sort of countries and generals, and pushing on through almost regardless of cost. I can't really waffle on too long because, again, I've not seen it, but
it does touch on things you said there, the futility of a lot of things to do with war, and also the fact with this, it's so farcical that people so high up in rank and influence can make such idiotic decisions that are like massively influential. And I suppose, again, this has been something that I've certainly said a couple of times before, that, you know, someone might say, oh, do you know what? I don't really like black and white films. And I'd go,
yeah,
what does that matter? If you enjoy anything that involves just watching a plot unfold and getting involved with characters and who they are, and you know, then why does that matter? Case in point would be like Wizard of Oz, the first film that was capable, I think, of using color, and they largely didn't do that. A lot of it was in black and white, and perhaps that made a similar point here. I think I almost get the feeling that if this film was capable of being in color, which it may well have been the time it came out, that's an interesting point. I haven't sort of looked that up. It could be that Kubrick was able to make this in color.
Yeah, I've got something nagging at the back of my mind that says that Kubrick decided to film it in color. I think mainly as a budget concern rather than necessarily a style thing, because with it being new technology, I think color film would have been highly expensive. So maybe that's a window. And
if it freed up the budget to do some of the other things that he does in this film, then I'm glad, because it's, considering it came out in 1964, and I can't be bothered to do the maths of how long that is ago.
It would be like somebody saying Schindler's List isn't worth paying attention to because it's black and white. So, well, not only is that utter rubbish, but the fact that it is black and white is then used to highlight certain points in the film, which make it all the more poignant.
Yeah, absolutely. It's everything is so brilliantly decided, and that's I had to talk about this. I mean, I felt guilty when I realised it had overstepped the mark, as it were, and I would have kicked something else out, but we'd already stepped beyond that, hadn't we? So maybe when we come to do the top 10, Loz, you can throw in an extra one yourself, and then I'll feel all the better for it that there's been some parity.
Okay, maybe. We'll see. I don't hold it against you.
No, good. Well, you shouldn't, because it was a genuine administrative error. And so here we are. It's taken us some time to get this far. We haven't even got to our top 10 yet. All we've talked about is our 10 honourable mentions, and that has occupied a great deal of time, but I'm glad that it did. I didn't want to curtail anything that either of us were saying for the sake of time. So believe you me, you do not want to go anywhere from here, because we're about to get into the top 10. And hopefully, either you know us already before these podcasts and you're intrigued, or hopefully, perhaps even better, would be that you didn't know us before these podcasts, but now you do feel like you know us and you are intrigued, because that would be lovely. But I'm not going to kid myself. I don't know if this podcast is going to go out and suddenly we'll have swathes of adoring fans, Loz. I don't think it quite works like that in this world, but
we've offered the outside world a window into our respective souls, and I'm sure that more than a few might be sort of keen to have a peek.
Well, we'll just have to find out. But I mean, for me personally, like I mentioned, the All the Right Movies podcast, and indeed another podcast which is Kermode on Film, Mark Kermode, who you must know as a reviewer. And I found that just after listening to those guys talk about a few of their beloved films, that I really wanted to hear more. I thought, right, I'm locked into this now. Like, I want to know if you've seen something that I love and what your take on it is. Or equally, I'd like to hear you sell a film to me that I haven't seen that I might do off the back of it. So maybe that's where people might be after these. I don't know. I might listen to this back in half an hour and go, no, this is shite. Like, we shouldn't even upload this at all. But I don't think that's going to happen somehow.
No, I'd be shocked. I think if you're still listening now and you've enjoyed yourself, then God bless you. I think we've only tried to entertain. I think it's something that thankfully comes naturally to the pair of us. And I think, there's far more sort of neglectable opinions than ours. Not to say that our counsel is the most learned or perhaps technical, but we know what we like, and I think that's always a good rule of thumb when you're talking about any sort of taste in film or music or indeed actual taste as in food.
Yeah, I want to listen to someone that has conviction in what they're saying, and
exactly.
And I know that we do. So hopefully you've enjoyed listening, and please do stay tuned for the next one, where we really get into the nub of it now, the top 10 Scott films of all time and the top 10 Loz films of all time. And then even if film isn't your thing, we will then be moving into something else that might be more up your street, which is television, or I don't know, maybe there'll be an avenue for feedback and it can be influenced by that. But we certainly talk toffee apples. Yeah, well, that was something I had in mind, because I've got a top 8 brand of toffee apples in mind.
To be fair, there is only one brand, and all the others pale in comparison. And I'm not going to share with you what that is. No. There you go. There's a cliffhanger for the end of the podcast.
Yes, indeed. Right. Well, a massive thank you for listening, as always, and
indeed,
please do tune in. We'll let you know when the next one's out, and we'll see you there.
Chip, chip, chow.